The term Immersive Sim may be one of the most controversial genre descriptors in modern gaming. If I mention Deus Ex, Thief, Dishonored, and other games, many people have an idea of what I mean. But if we look at the Immersive Sim category on Steam, we can see just about any game thrown in there. Personally, I probably wouldn't recommend FIFA, The Sims, or Euro Truck Simulator to fans of Prey. Once you go beyond fans of the genre, the term Immersive Sim starts to mean very little. But even to this day, devs and players alike still haven't come up with a good term to describe these games. Checking Wikipedia gives us the following definition. An immersive sim is a video game genre that emphasizes player choice. Its core defining trait is the use of simulated systems that respond to a variety of player actions, which, combined with a comparatively broad array of player abilities, allow the game to support varied and creative solutions to problems. Well, that's certainly a mouthful, but how rigid are those guidelines? Most people would agree that System Shock is an immersive sim, but what about Hitman? Hitman features highly simulated, incredibly intricate worlds, countless paths and tools at your disposal, all wrapped up in huge sandbox levels designed for unique, emergent gameplay. But it isn't first person, or it doesn't have RPG mechanics, or some other small nitpick you could come up with to disqualify it. The point is, you should have some idea of what an immersive sim is in your head. Unfortunately, the genre has largely fallen out of favor in AAA games lately. The last notable big-budget ImSim would be Deathloop, but even a lot of people will criticize that as not an immersive sim because they streamlined some things from Prey and Dishonored. So regardless of that whole immersive sim argument, we're left with indies to hold the torch for the genre as a whole. And boy have they been killing it lately. While AAA moves towards more linear, cinematic games, there's been a huge revival of indie ImSims over the past year or so. A few of them are playable right now, while others are right around the corner. So I decided to break down some of the most promising entries from indie teams of all shapes and sizes. Kicking things off, we have one of the most notable releases this year, Gloomwood. Now, I've already done some videos on Gloomwood, from checking out the demo a few years ago to breaking open the recent early access. It's been a pleasure to watch Gloomwood grow and evolve into such an impressive project over the years. If you haven't heard of it, I think it's most easily described as a modern take on the Thief games. It pulls lots of familiar elements from past ImSims while offering tons of unique ideas of its own. Even if you haven't played the Thief games, I think there's a lot to love here. Fans of Dishonored will probably feel right at home in Gloomwood. The only real downside right now is there isn't more of it. The early access features 3 hefty levels, but there's still quite a lot more on the horizon. As for me, I'll definitely be hopping back in for more Gloomwood in the coming months. Since I mentioned Gloomwood, it only makes sense to talk about Blood West next. I mean, you can pick up both games together in a bundle on Steam. Blood West does share a number of similarities with Gloomwood, but it's a little more action and RPG flavored than its counterpart. It's a game about stalking around a haunted Wild West setting, killing monsters, and collecting loot along the way. And I specifically said stalking because there are a lot of throwbacks to the Stalker series here. From the semi-open world scavenger gameplay, all the way down to the classic grid inventory juggling. In that same vein, Fallout fans will probably enjoy Blood West too. A lot of the gameplay time mirrored my experience with the recent Fallout games. There's definitely some rough edges, but that's understandable given that it's still in early access. For example, one of my biggest gripes is that you lose important stats when you die, and these curse effects stack up on each death. You can clear them by doing side quests, but the whole concept of some games becoming even harder when the player dies has always felt a little weird to me. Sure, I stuck through it, but I can see how stuff like this can demoralize the average player, making them not want to continue on after dying a few times. But otherwise, I had a good time with Blood West, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the upcoming zones turn out. Shifting gears, next up is a more puzzle-oriented ImSim. Ctrl Alt Ego is a game about hacking robots in space. You play as an entity who can jump between just about any mechanical beings in sight. Once inside, you can use their abilities to progress through the level, whether that's hopping into a door to unlock it, possessing a camera to scout an area, or even taking over a killer robot to shoot lasers at another robot. Mix that bot-hopping gameplay with a wide variety of special abilities, and you have a tremendous number of ways to approach any situation. While this does all happen in real time, it all feels very puzzly in design. You have limited resources and a selection of a few available powers at any given time. With the obstacles and enemies between you and the goal, it's up to you to figure out the optimal methods to beat each level. While the systems are intricately designed, some parts do stick out a little bit. For example, the combat felt a little unsatisfying and lacking a bit of polish. But given the huge scope and mostly solo dev working on it, I wouldn't hold it against him. Plus, there's a good bit of snarky humor throughout to keep you entertained in the downtime. Many people compare it to Prey, but it's definitely more of a plan and then execute kind of game, while Prey is much more action oriented. But either way, I think it's still worth checking out. On the topic of hacking games, we have Deadeye, Deepfake, Simulacrum. Amazingly, both this game and Ctrl Alt Ego are some of the only times I've actually enjoyed hacking in a game. There's a slightly technical aspect to it that's presented simply enough for anyone to pick up, but they retain enough complexity that you can pull off some really interesting things with hacking. If I had to give this game a silly tagline, I would call it The Thinking Man's Hotline Miami. It even reminds me a little bit of a game called Defragmented, which I made a couple years back. Although that game was faster paced and a little less mechanically complex. Deadeye has that top-down shooter core, mixed with some very intricately designed hacking mechanics that add a whole new layer to the gameplay. Instead of going in guns blazing, you have countless tools at your disposal to really shake things up. You can hack a washing machine to gain sight of the surrounding area, hack a turret to be friendly and then kick it into a room of enemies, or even hack bullets right out of the air. Or you can just ignore all that typing, pick up combat abilities, and play it like Hotline Miami. And that's just the core gameplay. Things are constantly being mixed up with countless twists and turns in the story, and new innovative levels being thrown at you left and right. Did I expect a haunted house level with zombie werewolf monsters in this cyberpunk shooter? Absolutely not, but I love how they pulled off all these wild concepts within such a limited scope. While the story keeps you in the dark most of the time, it's always dropping new threads to keep you itching for more. Surprisingly, the NPCs have rather cutesy dialogue in contrast to how stark the graphics are. The dialogue paired with the highly complex systems constantly reminded me of this programming meme. If we were picking classes, Deadeye would definitely fall in the lower right quadrant. I mean, I have a degree in computer science, so I can definitely confirm that most of my peers ended up in one of these 4 groups. But memes aside, you really gotta respect the dev for going all out on their vision, critics be damned. A top-down shooter with complex hacking system and cutesy characters wasn't something I thought I wanted, but I have to say it was a joy to play. You might notice how I kinda rambled on about this game for a while. Well, it's because I was just as surprised as you probably are on how good it is. It definitely has a slow start and doesn't feel the greatest to play in the beginning, but after countless deaths and a few unlocks, it all starts to come together in the best way. While it may not be the easiest game to recommend to a wide audience, I think it's absolutely worth picking up if the concept interests you at all. With recent releases out of the way, it only makes sense to move on to some upcoming titles. One of the most anticipated being Peripeteia, or Peripeteia according to Google. However you pronounce it, this game has managed to gain quite some buzz over the past year or so. After making almost 40k on Kickstarter and garnering a sizable audience, it's safe to say lots of people are looking forward to this game. In it, you play as an anime girl mercenary, exploring vast brutalist architecture and mowing down countless bad guys along the way. The marketing materials we've seen allude to a very cyberpunk take on the classic stalker format. While it does promise an array of powers to use, the guns always seem to take center stage in what we've seen so far. So if you're looking for a very heavily combat-oriented ImSim, this looks like a prime candidate. Fans of cyberpunk and a heaping helping of Eastern European themes will definitely want to keep an eye on this one. Oh, and they also happen to have a pretty active Discord server. From what I've seen, it's one of the more lively places to discuss immersive sims. I even found a couple games I'd never hear of otherwise on there. Like our next entry, Sorceress. Compared to some other games in this video, Sorceress appears to be in the earlier stages of development. Now, this game happened to have a demo, which I played through just the other day. You start off as this goofy T-posing girl, locked in a tower dungeon with no real motive. The artwork, especially the characters, are actually quite good for an indie project. You do some classic ImSim things like burn down doors, climb chains, and kick everything in sight. The actions were mostly nice and chunky, although some of the sound effects, like the kick, felt a little too loud in the mix. Eventually you get a magic gun that lets you bubble things and shoot water. You use the bubbles for a handful of physics puzzles, which reminded me a bit of some sections in Portal 2. There was a very small taste of the combat, but it didn't go too in depth. While it was mostly just a tech demo, it seemed promising enough to keep an eye on for the future. Speaking of tech demos, Corpus Edax first appeared as a small demo in the Haunted PS1 Game Jam. You play as a citizen in an off-world cyberpunk dystopia. Some resistance members recruit you to their cause, and you spend the rest of the demo punching and kicking dudes before it abruptly ends. It was all pretty janky, but the melee combat with first-person animations was surprisingly satisfying. After that small jam version, the game was announced to be in development for a full-size release. Since then, the dev has been posting plenty of tasty-looking melee combat throughout development. I don't know what the rest of the game will be like, but it's worth following for the fist fighting alone. Moving away from action-oriented games, we have Shadows of Doubt. Like some other Sims, this game revolves around a heavily simulated world. You play as a detective, solving cases in a city full of NPCs with their own schedules, desires, and personalities. The store page mentions that the cities are procedurally generated, so the experience you have might be completely different from someone else who plays. Oddly enough, I also made a procedurally generated detective game called Noir Syndrome back in 2014. Now that game was pretty small, so I doubt it inspired this, but the parallels are pretty interesting. At the very least, you know I'm already on board with this concept. Now I'm not sure how far along in development it is, but they were running a closed demo recently. I would have signed up to give you the inside scoop, but they specifically forbade videos and streams of the demo. Personally, I think demos can be a great time to get the word out about your game. I mean, the guys over at New Blood have often said how happy they were leaving Gloomwood's demo up for so long, but I guess they just wanted to keep Shadows of Doubt under wraps for now, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens next. Anyways, there is one last game I wanted to fit in this video, and guess what? I'm working on this one too. Look, sorry, I've been making weird niche games for a long time now, but all those ones I mentioned earlier are way old news. This is an upcoming project. My new game, Ad Infernum, is a survival horror immersive sim. So how could I not mention it in the big ImSim roundup video? I did mention it briefly in my last Gloomwood video, but I have been hard at work on this game for the past 3 years or so. It plays a bit like Prey meets Resident Evil or Alien Isolation. You wind up stranded at a gas station in the middle of the desert, crawling with otherworldly creatures. You can whack enemies with a baseball bat, climb just about anything, perform dark magic, eat rotten food, toss explosive radios, upgrade a nail gun to ridiculous levels, and a whole lot more. Aside from all that weird emergent gameplay you'd expect from an immersive sim, there's also a big focus on horror elements, all the way down to having a dedicated nerve bar. I'm nearing the later stages of development with it, so there might just be one more ImSim to add to the list in 2023, but I think that's enough talking about upcoming games for now. Phew, I really did not expect this video to be so long when I started working on it. It's just that playing through these games as both a dev and a fan of the genre gave me a huge boost of inspiration. I even had to cut down a lot of the sections here to keep this video somewhat reasonable. But if you stuck it out till the end, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts on immersive sims. Are there any games you're looking forward to? Or any older ImSims you picked up lately? Or if you just want to debate the age-old question, is Hitman an immersive sim? Anyways, I'm going to put links to all these games in the description, so definitely check them out if they sounded interesting to you. And if you enjoyed this video, subscribing is always greatly appreciated. I'd be happy to make more content like this if there's enough interest. But on the other hand, I do have a lot of big projects I want to look into, which reminds me, I should probably start researching those now. So thanks for stopping by, folks. I hope to see you all in the next one.